From our perspective, yes, there's definitely a spike in claims, and I think there are a couple of drivers. And maybe what we'll do, Shanaz, is we can talk a little bit of external factors and the internal factors. On the external side, there's definitely an impact of the economy. So we're in a situation where there's a reluctance to spend money. And the reluctance is driven from very real factors. The economy is really tight. So where we spend our money as clients, as business owners, as entrepreneurs, etc., becomes a tight balancing act. So we recognize that it has an impact on your risk. I think when you start focusing very much on how you spend and what you spend, perhaps you do cut some corners. You might not necessarily all have the right regulatory compliance in mind. When you start that, you're doing what's necessary to keep your business going, and that definitely has an impact on risk. I think another external factor, certainly from my side, is the political environment that we're in. So there's no doubt that that's creating a greater sense of instability in our country at the moment, and that spills over into things like riot and arson, and proving arson is really tough, so the political environment is definitely there. And then we've been coming through a period also from an external perspective around market conditions, so we've been in a soft market for a long time. So and the impact of that is that if my risk is not so great, and insurer starts putting pressure on that risk, there's always been the ability just to move that risk to another insurer because there's been capacity. So we've allowed almost the sense of, well, insurance is risk mitigation, it is risk protection, and as a result, the onus on the client to fix their own business has perhaps not what it should have been, and this starts rolling forward into the number of losses that we've seen, and perhaps maybe two last things that also are very specifically South African based is one is we do have an aging municipal infrastructure, so aging water pipes. We've now got issues related to things like drought, so water pressure is becoming an increasing issue in our business. If there's no water pressure in a pipe, a sprinkler system doesn't do a whole lot of good. You get this little dribble as opposed to a spray, and you get there and you want to spray the second story window, and your water doesn't get just past the end of the hose pipe. So those are the kind of things that we're seeing. So excuse me, and then just the fire services themselves, the quality, the skills, the actual equipment the fire departments have these days is not necessarily the same. And the investment to really fix and enable our fire protection services is obviously subject to budgetary constraints. So we aren't able to spend as a country what we would like to. There's some good plans. I guess they're just not being delivered again. So maybe that's, I don't know if you want to talk to the specific number of claims that we've been experiencing.
Year to date September of this year, we've already had over 60,000 claims. And the claims, the spike in claims this year is really attributable to some of to a lot of things, but the first, it started with the Cape Town fires, the Western Cape fires early this year, followed by the Knysna fires. And then after that, we had quite a few large commercial fires, and then eventually we've had at the beginning of October, unexpectedly these massive catastrophes in the Gauteng and Durban areas. So these have all contributed to the spike in claims. And whilst we anticipate all these commercial fires or some large commercial fires every year, I think added to that, the catastrophe losses and the amount of catastrophe losses, that is unusual. That is not normal in our business. And therefore, I think that contributes the biggest factors. Internally, in terms of some of the claims experience we've seen, there are various factors, internal factors that impact on these losses, and Andrew's spoken about some of them where clients are very tight, where the economic conditions are tight and clients don't have a lot of spare money to work on risk management initiatives. So we see with hot works, for example, hot works means welding, grinding, all those kind of things that people do, either to maintain the premises or to repair the premises. All of those things lead to the fact, can cause fires if they do not follow proper safety procedures. And lack of maintenance of buildings as well. The 50% of our claims relate to electrical in nature, and again there you cannot definitely prove how the fire started. However, having said that, we have some electrical we insist in Santam on a less than 3-year electrical certificate of compliance for that reason alone, you know, because maintaining those kind of the DB boards and things like that is very critical. So in terms of we've had a few warehouses burning down this year, and some very large one. I think that the Durban one, the Transnet one, is the big one. And there again, exactly what I've said before about the hot work, that was actually the cause of the fire, where certain, I think it was welding that was being done, resulted in ignition, sparks flying around, and the sparks touching the combustible materials that was in the roof. And as a result of that, the fire started. So that is a big issue with warehousing risks. Also the stacking heights of goods that are stored in warehouses. If you have a sprinkler system, if you stack too high, it will not be effective, as Andrew has said. You know, it will not be effective in the event of a fire because it's now being blocked and therefore cannot be as effective. Some of the stuff we found was lack of proper housekeeping. So when we say lack of proper housekeeping, the lack of proper housekeeping leads to two things. Either the fire spreads quicker or it burns quicker, and both. I mean, it's and. So that's why we insist on proper housekeeping, especially in manufacturing risks and storage risks, because that will then, if you have proper housekeeping and you keep everything in order, it's easier to control, it's easier to reach the firefighting equipment when it ignites, when the fire ignites. Another thing we found actually is the lack of smoke detection, because prevention is better than cure, right? And if you don't have proper smoke detection, it generally then the fires, you know, carry on burning, and they usually happen at night when there's nobody on the premises. So you could have a great firefighting equipment and staff who are trained. However, if it happens when nobody's on the premises, then it's a problem.
In the space as well, we are seeing a laxing also in terms of the regulations or compliance to the regulations around building, you know, spatial planning, etc. So there's no doubt that that also isn't being complied with. You know, we see spread of fire, big risk also in industrial areas, not just in residential or farming.
Yes.
If buildings are built too close together and you aren't complying with those proper spatial planning and regulatory guidelines, it also, you know, it makes your impact of your fire so much more impactful.
We've also had quite a few thatch losses. And with those particular ones, they were old buildings which didn't have the building regulations at the time to comply with. And therefore there were lack of spark arresters in the chimney. And when a fire is left smoldering in the night, once it goes up the chimney, there's no spark arresters, and therefore it goes onto the roof, and that's it. I mean, it burns in seconds.